Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me. I've only ever done one of these before, so you'll have to bear with me, and we'll see how it goes. If you've got any questions, then just type them in, and we'll try and do a painting and answer some of your burning questions. Now, first up, I'll say I am not a professional. I've been painting since about 2011, but I did have a 2 or 3 year gap. I mainly paint Bob Ross style landscapes, but I have painted in watercolour, acrylic, and do drawing in pencil as well. So today we're going to just try and do a bit of a Northern Lights wet on wet demonstration. For those of you that are brand new to painting and a bit confused by what wet on wet means, well, all it means is at the moment the canvas is completely dry. For those interested, this is oil paper, by the way. I find this is quite a good alternative to canvas, significantly cheaper. It is paper, but it's very resilient and it works like canvas. So wet on wet means that you're painting onto a wet surface. Okay, so at the moment this is completely dry, and in the wet on wet style, Bob Ross style, he uses what's called liquid white to put a thin film of diluted white on the canvas before he starts. And what that allows him to do is blend the colours directly on the canvas, which is what we want to do to produce a nice Northern Lights sky which has got lots of greens and oranges and reds and purples and blues all mixed in. So what I'm going to do first is mix some liquid white. So what I will do is just tilt my screen down a little bit, and hopefully you'll be able to see just a standard kitchen plate. And to make liquid white, I'm using a blob of titanium white and some linseed oil. Now I use Winsor & Newton Artisan, which is water soluble, so they're not traditional oils, they're ones which can be washed with water. So because I'm using artisan colours, I also need to use the artisan brand linseed oil, and this is being genetically modified to work specifically with this type of paint. Don't try and mix water soluble paints or products or oils with non-water soluble ones, because as we all know, oil and water do not mix. That's why this is all a bit weird, really. I have painted in Bob Ross paints and in traditional oils, and Bob Ross paints tend to be a bit thicker, but they're not widely available in the UK, whereas traditional oils and the water soluble oils, I can't really find any difference between them, other than it's significantly easier to clean up water soluble oils because they act the same as acrylic. When I'm finished, I'll be able to take this and just wash it under warm water, wash my brush out using warm water. As we all know, that's a complete nightmare with oils. Okay, so I've just mixed this to a nice consistency. You can see that it's significantly slicker than the paint that came out the tube. So all we're going to do now is put a thin surface cover of this across the surface. So I'm going to just tilt my screen back up, and then we're just going to put this on. Now, if you watch the Bob Ross videos, he very rarely shows you this stage. He just says, I've primed a canvas and I've put liquid white on it. There are, I think, a couple of episodes where he actually tells you or shows you what the process is, but he seems to be a bit cagey about it. I don't know why. From my experience, this is possibly the most crucial step to the whole painting. And the reason why is if you get this bit wrong, you're just in a world of pain from that point onwards. Because clearly you can, it's a bit like the Three Bears, you know, one version of this is too wet, one version of this is too dry, and one version is just right. And obviously we're trying to get the just right. Now you want it to be wet, but it needs to be a thin coat. Definitely less is more. Just work it so that you've got a thin coat. If you're not sure whether you've coated all your canvas, look off to the side, and any dry patches should show as matte. It would be nice actually if you're live and listening, is to just type me a message and let me know who's online and where you're from and what your level of painting is. And if there's anything particular that you want me to cover, we can cover that. So there we go, nice thin coat of liquid wire. I've got plenty of that left, which might come in handy later for just using with other paints. But for now I'm just going to try and find a space on my very overcrowded desk. It's a bit weird for me because I'm in my study where I normally do model building and computer work and what have you. I don't typically paint in here, but all the technology is in here, so I need that. Right, so canvas prepared. Let's have a look at some colours. So again, I'm going to tilt you down to the palette. My palette is just a porcelain bathroom tile. Go for a neutral colour, light grey, beige, whatever. It just means that what you're mixing looks a little bit more natural. And again, very easy to clean. Just got myself a scrubbing brush, and when I'm finished I can just take it straight off. Now, thinking about the northern lights and the colours that we want in the sky, phthalo green or viridian green is ideal. That's that typical northern lights colour. I'm going to cheat a little bit today, and I've got some ready mixed purple. When painting normally I would never usually use ready mixed purple, but it's very, very strong and ideal for this. Similar with the orange, this is cad orange, and have a bit of that. And the other one which is nice for northern lights is alizarin crimson, because that's a very, very strong red. And then for yellow we've just got cad yellow. Cad yellow. Look at that. And blue is French ultramarine. Okay, you could use cerulean blue. I do actually have cerulean blue. I might just have a bit of cerulean blue as well. Okay, so I don't really have a plan for this picture, other than a blended sky and some fir trees, and we'll have to see what happens. That's quite common for me. I don't really have a plan too much when I paint, unless I'm doing a specific, copying something or. So let's dive on in. So in terms of composition, I'm going to use the rule of thirds. So typically you will not have your horizon halfway, you'll have it on a third. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the horizon roughly on the first third. So because this is predominantly a sky picture, I'm going to leave most of the picture, 2/3 of the picture, to the sky, and then the rough horizon where the fir trees will be in the final third. Okay, so that's the general composition, and what we want to do is try and get some contrast between the fir trees and the sky. So I'm going to add be dark up here, but with different colours, a bit lighter, down into light, and then when I put my dark trees in front, hopefully we'll get some contrast with the light behind, and then make it stand out, and then we'll try and put a few stars in and see how we go. Okay, so first off, I am going to start with some ultramarine blue straight into there, and because I'm going to start with the top corners, I'm going to put some of that purple in, some of that alizarin crimson in. That's going to mix something which is looking fairly blackish. Don't over mix it, because on a picture like this where you've got a sky, you want all the different colours to come out. So I'm going to tilt back up. Unfortunately I can't show you the palette and the screen at the same time. Sorry, the palette and the picture at the same time. But I'll make sure that I describe what I'm mixing, and if I'm doing anything particularly special when I mix, then I will tilt it back down so that you can see it. Okay, so we've got our dark colour, and we're going to start a little bit in each corner. Okay, it's not particularly dark actually. And there's two things to say straight off the bat. One is the more that you paint, the bigger area you paint, the lighter the colour will become, because I don't know if you can see already, I'm picking up white off the canvas because it's automatically mixing. And you can use that to your advantage, because what you can do is you can say, oh, I want a bit of a lighter area here, or a bit of a lighter area here, and just splodge it through. But I'm trying to work my way in with darker corners, because that brings the focus into the middle. So I'm just going to go back and reload with some darker paint, and just go back over that. Now when you do this, you're going to have to reload quite frequently. You see I've touched into the red there, that's given me a nice... So you're sort of alternating between the purple, the blue, the red, and also naturally, just happening by chance really, the light and the dark. It's all kind of doing it itself. I think Bob says, this is a lazy way of painting, and considering, compared to some methods, he's absolutely right, because look, we've already covered a third of the canvas. Okay, so just try not to overwork it, because if you do, you're going to end up with just a mush of one colour. And don't worry about the brush strokes at this stage. We'll come back, obviously, and we'll blend that. And that's my dark brush, just a decorator's brush actually, about 1/2 inch. I'm just going to pick up another brush. This one will do, because I don't really want the same brush for light and dark, because that's how you're going to end up with mud. So now I'm just going to take a bit of the cad yellow, think about where my real light spot's going to be, and just go in there. So kind of going to go for like a horizon glow, if you like. And there aren't really any rules with this, you just kind of go with it. And just because I've committed to that area of yellow now, doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. So all I'm trying to do is get some light in at the horizon. Now what is quite important at this stage is that you wipe your brush between colours, and that you don't really paint all the colours into each other. You want to try and keep them just as blocks of colour at this moment in time. Okay, now the phthalo green I'm using, or the viridian green, is super strong, but it's kind of the colour that says Northern Lights, and it works really well against the yellow. Okay, but again, just be careful with it. And what I'm doing here is I'm just wiping my brush. So this is a really good example. This side of the brush, hope you can see this, the green, I haven't really used that and it's still green. When I've been up in here, the other side of the brush, look, it's got that purple on. So if I now paint that down here, I'm going to have purple. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'll wipe it off. Just got a towel, a serviette, could be paper towel, anything. Don't use tissues because they disintegrate, but just, you know, some robust paper or cloth if you like, washing, and just have a think about, you know, what you're trying to do here. I'm just trying to get sort of some suggestion of some green strands going across. Okay, I do like this green, so I'm just going to sneak a bit onto the edge of that yellow there. Okay. And then in the reference photo that I used, I have to cover myself in white paint already. In the reference photo that I looked at before we started today, the centre was kind of a reddy orange. So what I'm going to do there then is in this gap here, I'm just going to get some alizarin crimson. Such a strong colour. I'm so careful with that. Gosh, look at that. Just going to work that in a little bit. Again, wiping between brush strokes. Don't want to overdo it, because that, you can see how that steals the focus straight away. So I wouldn't put any of that red towards the edge of the picture, because it's just going to lead people's eyes straight out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of that crazy orange, dumb it down with a little bit of red, and then just sort of just go on the inside of the red. And then just a bit of the orange without the red. Ooh. That's a firecracker. And then just in between that gap. So see how I'm trying to avoid the colours all touching each other at this stage. So that's laying. If you hear about people, I'm laying in my colours. It's kind of what they're doing. So out on the edge here, I'm just going to block this area in dark. Same up here, just pull that through, take the orange out. Okay, and then I'm just going to just sneak in just a bit of variation. When you do this for the first time, you think, oh my god, I'm producing a mess. And you kind of have to do a few before you realise that you know, it has to be at this stage. It's a bit like when you tidy your garage. You know, the garage usually ends up a lot messier before it gets tidier. And it's kind of what these paintings are like. Just again, just putting in a bit more variation up here, and some blues in, bit of red. Okay, we're about there. So next step is blending. This is the joy of wet on wet. And the key to blending is, firstly, don't overdo it. It doesn't really take long. And you're going to have the right brush. Now, this one is a Dale Rowney brush that I got from the Range, which is a UK shop that sells all sorts of things, but they have a nice art section. And for the characteristics, if you like, of a blender brush, firstly, it's quite big. Secondly, it's quite long. Thirdly, it's really soft. So, like, if you take a traditional oil bristle brush, the firm and the rough, you're not going to be able to blend with that. That will just push the paint around on the surface. Okay. So what we're looking for is something where you can very, very, very gently blend your colours together. The other thing, again, if you've not really worked in the oil medium very much, is that, you know, you're not really rushed. So this painting is not going to dry for hours. So, you know, I could go away and have a cup of tea, or walk around the block if I wasn't isolated. Thank you, coronavirus. I could just about leave it overnight, but I wouldn't really recommend that. But you've got time, so you know you're not in a rush. You can take your time with it. Okay, so blender brush. Now the other thing you got to think about when you're blending is direction. So usually with Northern Lights, you've got sort of streaks of light, and you want to see if you can work that in as you go. So let's just start up in the top corners because there's less risk up there. Now you need to be really gentle. If you can feel the brush on the canvas, you're too close and you're pushing too hard. This needs to be light, really light. The objective here is twofold: blend the colours to get rid of the brush marks and mix those colours a little bit. So I've decided with this, you can see just from that very first section, that I'm going to go across here like there's some kind of, you know, motion passing through. If this was a normal day, you might think that it was a wind or something. You can see already, look, I barely touched this. Already you've got the purple and the red and the blue all mushed together, and this green has become feathered. You know, if you remember before, look, that was just a blob. Look at this here, how it's just blobs. So let's just carry on. So what you want to do, again, be gentle, really gentle. And wipe your blender brush. Gotta wipe it a lot, because as you do this, you're picking paint up all the time. Now, you know, that's not a bad thing necessarily, but you don't want to turn it all into one colour. And if you do this too much, it'll all become one colour. And they call it mixing mud. I'm sure we've all done that in our time. And be very careful as well when you get into the light areas, because obviously any kind of dark colour going into this yellow is just going to obliterate it. So just trying to use the corner of my brush just to blend those out. Sometimes I'll deliberately go into the dark area and just come back into the lighter area. But you just need to be really gentle with it. I'm going to paint my phone here. I was hoping we would get some questions, but we haven't, so I'm just going to move that over there. I'm not going to paint it. Okay, so I'm quite pleased with the way that that's looking. We've achieved the first objective, which is, you know, the dark corners. There's some nice green going on, some nice patch, some brush marks here which just blend those out. Okay. I just had an idea that maybe we can just put in a row of conifers here and then just have a touch of water so you can see some of those colours reflected and some reflections. Okay, just trying to work out whether I want to do anything else with that before we move on. Just blend some of these things through. I might just pop a little bit more dark, because once you've blended this, you know, you're not finished. You can, alright, you know, I'm going to go a bit darker here, I've decided, and I'm going to have a bit more, you know, purple here. I'm going to have a bit more, you know, red here. And all you do, once you've applied that, make sure your blender brush is blah, blah, blah. That's not easy to say. Make sure your blender brush is clean, and again, just gently blend it in. My wonderful wife Emma has just snuck in behind me and brought me a cup of coffee, so if you hear me slurping, you know what that is. Okay. So sometimes you look at this and you think, yeah, but then you look at things and they don't look quite right. Like, I'm really happy with that. That looks like a cloud or something. Here I seem to have managed to produce a bit of a line. You do have to be careful about sort of, your brain is kind of geared to be symmetrical, and you have to be careful, you know, that you don't, even without thinking about it, come up with patterns. The classic one is if you're painting mountains. You know, it's quite common for people that are analytical to paint, you know, regular mountains, all the same size, in a row, or follow a pattern, you know, up, down, up, down, up, down, and they don't even know they're doing it until somebody points it out to them. The reason why I know this is because that's happened to me a few times, and then you have to do an adjustment, you know. So, you know, it really does pay to just take a little bit of time. I'm not talking a lot of time, I'm talking about a couple of minutes, just to sit back and have a look. But then, you know, the counter side of it is that you can't fiddle with it either all day, because it's like you've got to finish, you know, the painting. So I'm fairly happy with that. So I think what we're going to do now is just block in the ground. So for this, I'm just going to take my purple, blue, crimson, and that will mix fairly dark, blackish brown. Doesn't need to be black. You know, there's going to be some light from the sky, and you don't want to just put in a straight, you know, horizon. I'm trying to lead the eye into this bright spot here. I haven't decided yet how high my trees will be, but all I know is that, you know, we've worked hard to put this yellow in. At this stage, we certainly don't want to obliterate it. So now with this, you know, to get it dark, if I just keep painting here, you see how this is just getting lighter. Okay, it's picking the white up. And go back and reload your brush. If you need to, put more of the darker pigments in. It's actually quite purple, this, which is, you know, it's okay. No particular reason why you should paint it boring black when you could go for, you know, an exciting purple. So I just want to just do like a gradual slope. And as you might have picked up there, I've done that, you know, just with a series of rough brush strokes, because I don't want a straight edge. You know, you imagine that on the ground there's little bushes and what have you, and you're not going to get a straight edge. Now we did talk about putting in a little bit of water here, so with that in mind, I'll just sort of block that to about there. Now this bottom piece here where it hits the water will be even darker, so I'm just going to introduce a little bit of burnt umber. I never use black. You don't get black in nature. If you want dark, then usually brown and ultramarine blue and crimson will get you there. Now, see how this colour sits. Yeah, that's okay. But again, it goes light really quickly because of the So all I'm doing is just making the bottom piece. What I'm trying to do is make the bottom piece of this darker to sort of indicate like a little shoreline or shadow or whatever. Okay. Just keep your brush strokes a bit random. This is meant to be like shrubbery. I'm trying to avoid straight lines. Okay. Now at the moment when you look at this picture you can't really tell the scale. I mean I could put tiny trees in here and it would be a vast, you know, panorama. But you know, then it's all about the sky and, you know, is there enough in the picture? It's difficult. So just for a bit more interest today, I think we're going to go with some, you know, some bigger trees. Might do the water first. No, do the water afterwards, because then we'll know what reflections we need to put in. Okay, so how do we paint trees? Well, let's go through a few ways of painting trees. So get yourself a tiny brush, detailed brush. Get some of your dark colour on there. So we've got a tiny brush with some dark colour on. Decide where your tree's going to go, and then just sort of work it in. Now again, you're going to have to keep going back. So all this tree is really, if you think about what a fir tree is, it's a straight trunk. Maybe it just helps if I put that in. Straight trunk. And then you've got, typically on a fir tree, upward branches. So as you work down, you think about just, I'll do it I do it broadly so you can see the way that I do them. Just almost like crosses. Okay. Obviously I'm getting, this is too light. But what you want to try and do is get breaks. You don't want to just put in a whole shape, because you'll ruin this lovely light background we've got, and we want to try and keep that. Now, if you like painting trees in this way, great. It'll take you a while. Okay, just make sure that that base is nice and dark like that. And just, again, just in the center, just give, you don't have to do it all over, but just give here and there an indication of a trunk. And then for the very top, you either need to do it with a very fine liner, or use your friend the palette knife. So I've got my palette knife here, and then just literally scratch the, just scratch the top up. Okay, so you want a nice sharp top, but this edge should be rough. That's what pine trees are like. Okay, hope you can see that. So typically, to get the eye into the middle of the painting, you'd put bigger trees on the sides, and then you'd put maybe small trees or your focal point, whatever that is, in the middle. And they've just got a little funny blob of red paint there. Just blend that away. Okay, so we've got a fairly big tree there. I'll use the same method to put another one in. Let's go slightly bigger. Can't emphasize enough, you just got to keep going back for more paint, because otherwise it just ends up too light. See, the other thing with fir trees is they do get bigger as they go down the bottom. Having all these different colours in there, you know, is kind of a happy little accident. It makes it look like you worked on it for hours. What you didn't really, just because it's naturally blended. Again, make sure the bases are dark. It's where there's not much light falling down there. I want to give you an example of what happens if you like mess up the top with your tree. It happens from time to time. So say, you know, you're trying to put in a really thin line there and you end up putting in a blob. You go, you know, you can fix that, because all you need to do is just make your tree a bit taller. You might have to widen it a bit as you go down. And then once you know the palette knife trick, you can just go in and scratch the new top. You have a very steady hand for this. I haven't really got a steady hand, but there we go. Cool. Now you won't typically get a lot of highlights on a scene like this, because it's dark. Any light you've got has disappeared over the horizon, so you don't really need to worry about, you know, shading your trees. You just need to remember that these trees are not in any real light so they do need to be quite strong and quite dark. Okay, so we've got 2 there. Now you could just run the trees down in size as you go across, or we could put something big on this side. For now I'm just going to put in a few additional trees. So I'm going to go for a fairly small one here because I want that contrast against the yellow. And try and make sure use the end of the brush and get some fur-like marks. And again, just make sure it's dark enough down at the bottom. Okay, easy really. Of course, don't have to do just fir trees. I mean, let's just give some kind of indication of some kind of bush, shrubbery. There we go. And pop a little on this side. I feel like I should be putting a big tree in here. Yeah, like it's an opportunity to break out the fan brush. If you want to give the impression of distant trees, by the way, they're very easy to do. So get yourself a something with a fairly straight edge. Look at this. Okay, leave it completely dry, and then where you want your little trees to show, let's say we wanted to give some indication of some little trees here in the distance, just touch into the dark paint and pull up. So you don't have to do much, just okay. So you know, if we were going to indicate that there's a little forest or something going on, I mean, equally there could be grasses or reeds down by the front. You kind of can let the person viewing the painting decide. I mean, I quite like that because what we've got now is like an indication of some grasses or reeds or something, or trees, whatever you want them to be. And then just using the purple and the brown, I'm going to put in a fairly big tree here. Which is going to break into those. I'm going to vary the colour a little bit. I'm going to have the ones on this side a little bit more browny red. He's quite a big old tree, this one. And then just leave that little bit of a gap. Just suggests something's going on. If you want to, what you can do is, obviously I can't leave just one tree on his own there. So if I just pull up these little pieces here, then when I put his friend in next door, just preserve a little bit of that. I'm sure that looks much like a tree. Just make it a bit more tree-like. Okay, just making sure it's dark. I just want a bit of a top on this one. Doesn't take much. One thing you can do if you want is, obviously in this kind of rugged landscape, trees die, so you could, you know, have a suggestion of a dead tree. I have to be honest, I don't really like that. So I've got two options: blend it away, or put another tree over top. And I'm going to go for the tree over the top approach. Turned out to be a big one. Just suggest a trunk. Now, I guess all you guys will be used to doing your fir trees with a fan brush. That's fine if they're big. But it's not that practical to do them on with small. You can't do a small fir tree with a fan brush very easily. There we go. And I feel that maybe we should try and frame this bright area with another tree or two. Very therapeutic painting trees on a Tuesday afternoon when should really be at work. I'll show you a slightly different way of doing it. Let's pick up my dark colour and just get a roll of paint. Decide where my tree's going to go. Might do a fairly big one, and just scratch it in. Okay, and that's kind of where the trunk's going to be. And back to my brush. This is a bit more sort of bob style, just sort of touch. I mean, these don't all have to be the same variety of fir tree. You know, at the end of the day, it's a Scandinavian forest, and I'm sure they've got more than one species of tree. Okay. What I'm deliberately doing here is, we've worked really hard to get these nice colours. Don't just obliterate them. And just use a very end of your brush there, just to get a bit of texture. Yeah, that's a nice one. And then I think what I'm going to do is just pop a smaller one in the other side. Little wonky one there. Pop those in. There we go. Make sure I've got some dark and just pop in the trunks. We'll get down to the bottom here, just make sure we've got the darks at the bottom. It's possible there that we've got a little path going on. Interesting. Maybe down, to the shore. Have a look, see if we can put a path in there. The easiest way for that is, believe it or not, at this point I don't have any white on my palette. I've got my liquid white from earlier, so that'll do. I'll just load up a tiny brush with a bit of liquid white and just put the indications of wherever you see it, a little path coming through. There we go. So again, could be a path, could be a stream coming into the water. Don't overthink it. Let the viewer decide. You're just trying to evoke a reaction. Just notice that I've got a very light bank over there. Okay, so water time. So clearly we want to try and get some texture, and I want some contrast to the purple. So I just want a fairly still indication of a lake. So I've got some blue still on my half-inch brush. So all I'm going to do, it's still wet, what I'm going to do is just go from the outside in, just pull it across, from the outside in, pull it across. Now try and stay straight, because water doesn't, you don't want your water to fall out your picture. Okay, and don't do it too much. Hopefully you can see that we've got a mixture there of the dark colours, the blue that I've just put on against the white, and then what you can do is take your dark purple and just put a few darker spots, but don't do it right up by the shoreline. Just put in a few dark spots. I know you're thinking I've gone balmy. Get your blender, which again, make sure it's dry, and then just lightly go over those. And all that does is it gives you a few darker pieces. It's just, variation in the depth of the water or whatever. Okay. Next thing we need to do is shadows. Shadows? No. Reflections. So again, with your dark colour, things are really easy. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to reverse paint your fir trees. Okay? That's just looking a little bit odd, that one. That's So all I'm going to do is reverse paint these fir trees. Now clearly we haven't got a lot of water, shadows would be quite, the reflections would be quite big. I don't want to just obliterate everything, so I'm just going to give an indication. So all I'm going to do, just put in a bit of an indication. Okay, it doesn't need to be very accurate, but it does need to be consistent, and they do need to be in line. And just leave a bit of that white. You know, that suggests quite a big ripple. You know, you don't have to have them continuous. You can, if you want to, just leave a break like that. Okay, so it's very rough. Okay, and then once again the magic of the blender. So all you're doing, very lightly, got to do this straight, very lightly, just go across. That's it. And all it does is it blends those darker areas. I've got very purple hands. I'm a very messy painter, which is not good when I'm over carpet in my office, but you know. So it's indications. Now they might not be strong enough. You might want, you know, something a bit bolder. So let's just give you an example. Just make it a bit darker. It's nice actually. So I'm just going to go a bit darker on these ones. I mean, you do have to be careful that you don't smear out all your bank and what have you, so you know, just be mindful of that. And then just to give it a bit more oomph, because it's nice, some nice brush marks there, but it's just a bit flat, is have a look up in your sky at where some of the colours are. And then just very gently just drop some of those colours in. I recommend wiping your brush a lot, basically between every colour. And again, that all looks a bit weird, but once you've blended it, you'd just be left with a few tiny colours. Not a lot, it's quite subtle. It just means that some of the colours that are in the sky are now reflecting in the water. Should put a bit of green in, really. Just touching a bit of green. Yeah, it's nice. Okay, now just want a bit more contrast, so again, just going back into my really dark, just here and there. Just from a few darker spots. Okay. Can't emphasize how light you've got to be with that brush. You can feel it touching the canvas, it's too hard. Bob says 3 hairs and some air. Well, here's an interesting little problem we've got here. We've got something stuck on the canvas, a little blob or something. So because we're wet on wet, just take that out. I've left a little scratch mark. Get me blender brush. Blend it away. Okay. So next thing, just to really define the difference between the water and the land, I'm going to put in a water line. Again, I'm just going to use the liquid white that I've got from earlier for that, and all I'm going to do is pop it on and press. So just, you don't want it to be a regular straight line, you just want it to be an indication. You actually want it to be wonky, because what it does is it indicates, you know, an uneven shoreline. It's actually quite difficult to do, because keen eye amongst you will have noticed that I've just stuffed that up really. This bit here, just way too high. I'm just going to lift it out. All I've got here is a brush, which I'm just touching against that white. Wiping my brush in between strokes. It's very forgiving. If you were doing watercolour, you know, you just haven't got this degree of flexibility. You kind of, if you make a mess, you make a mess. Push that one down a little bit. You might need to just get your dark colour and go back up behind. Okay. So just I'm going to put the odd indication of a ripple. You work well against those dark areas. Try and make sure they're straight, unlike mine. I'm just going to... Not sure what's going on in the middle there. I don't know if that's you know, a path or a inlet or what really. Okay. So then, final thing, if you want to, you can just get a bit more contrast in this dark area by just, you know, putting a few sticks and twigs, as Bob calls them. I know from past experience it's really easy to overdo this. You go, woo, it's lovely, and then you realise you might put about 8,000 in them across your picture. You can also use that if you want to, just to indicate, you know, give an indication of the trunk as well. Just, you know, if you think they're kind of sticking out of it, then just dab them out at the base. Cocktail stick's quite good. going to mess too much with that. There's the final thing, which you sometimes see on Northern Lights inspired pictures, is stars. Now the brave amongst us would mix up a quite very thin white and splatter it on with a toothbrush, but quite frankly I'm not brave enough to do that, and I don't want that many stars anyway. So what I've got is a cocktail stick or a toothpick, which I just dab in a very small blob of titanium white, and then in the dark areas you get about, if you're lucky you get a few stars per go. Vary their height, vary their location. It's a bit difficult to vary their size, but to be honest, when the sky is this bright, you wouldn't see many stars. You're just trying to get an indication. If you're feeling really brave, then just get a brush and put in a bigger one. Oh, head of my brush is just broken off. That's not good. Get a brush and put in a bigger one. I'm just having a bit of a nightmare here. I managed to just snap the head off my brush. So I've got another brush here, and let me just see if I can put in a slightly bigger star. So, but don't, do stars like kids do them, making them star shaped or anything. You really don't need a lot. That was quite big. If you do put one in and you don't like it, like I don't like that one, again, make sure you've got your clean blender brush and just very gently blend it out. Won't get rid of it completely. Okay, so I think we might be done. I've noticed I've completely lost my reflections, which is a bit of a shame. So I might again just put a few indications of some reflections. If that happens, sometimes you can lose some of your later work, like the water lines or whatever, but nobody's saying you've got to put more reflections in. Just I feel that will lift the painting a bit. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the live stream. I hope you found this useful and enjoyable. If you did, leave some comments and I'll do another one. It's a bit of a weird time at the moment because obviously lots of people are isolated with time on their hands. That's kind of why I'm doing it, because I'm the same, and if I can help you guys improve or just inspire you in some way, then it's been worthwhile. Right, we'll stop fiddling with this now. and that out. Now, just before I shoot off, I just want to give you the final view of the painting and explain how I signed them. So this is oil canvas, oil paper rather than canvas, and it's just taped using frog tape, which is just expensive masking tape, to a board. It's actually a old large kitchen mat. I tend to, firstly, it obviously holds the painting to the board, but secondly what it does is it gives you a nice crisp border. You have to be gentle when you take it off, because it can rip the paper if you're a bit too energetic with it. But I just like the look of it. I like the the clean edge rather than painting up to the off the edge of the paper all the time. But it is a personal thing, and what it does is it just gives you a little border where you can sign. So I'm not going to do that now, but as you can see, we've got a little white space down at the bottom. So there you go. Hopefully see you next time. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.